Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Tex Hlalele. Welcome to the SIMM's webinar series. Today we have a privilege of welcoming a very different speaker than we've had in the past, which has been very technically focused, but we thought in the times that we are currently living in, it would be a good thing to have somebody help us think about leadership in difficult times. So this morning, I'm very privileged to introduce our speaker. I read his bio and it was very interesting the way he describes himself. Tex describes himself as a life coach, motivational speaker, and author that uses his life journey experiences to cultivate personal mastery and self-worth in individuals and leaders around the world. So to me, that was very telling, and I think today I'm looking forward to hearing his take on this crisis that we're currently working through and living through. None of us have any reference for this, so it would be very interesting to hear a leadership perspective on it. So just a little bit of background about Tex. He has a master's degree in industrial psychology and also a master's degree in business leadership. He says his formal academic qualifications have been strengthened by his over 22 years of human resources experience. He's on-the-job training. He's attended numerous conferences and seminars, both locally and internationally. And he's been part of a myriad of development interventions and coaching activities. So today he's going to share some of his wealth of experience and insights towards mastering of leadership. And I also highly recommend for all of you attending to follow Tex on LinkedIn, where he regularly publishes excellent articles on personal mastery and leadership. I personally enjoy reading them. So currently, Tex also runs and manages a life and business coaching company called Dreams Made Possible. I really enjoy the title of the name of his company, but more telling is the tagline, which says unleashing inner strength, authority, and potential. So after all of this, Tex, would you kindly share your presentation with us and give us your insights into leadership in these difficult times? Thank you again very much for your time. You can proceed as soon as you're ready. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Thanks Isabel for the kind introduction. I really appreciate also the moment that SIMM have given me this morning to join and share some ideas. So I believe that I'm in the right space to say good morning, because when I looked at some of your benches outside South Africa, they are in Zambia and Namibia, and for that I think I'm still right to say good morning. But in the event that there might be somebody who is not within the time zone that we are at the moment, good day to you and welcome as we share some ideas around leadership. So as you had indicated, yes, my idea is just to share some ideas around leadership during the crisis. And I must immediately indicate that I'm not an expert in COVID, as an example. And much as this talk happens at this moment, I think some of the nuggets that I'll be sharing will be applicable beyond the phase of COVID. And from that perspective, I won't be talking as a health expert or a WHO expert as far as these issues are concerned. So my focus will be on health. I mean, on leadership. Thanks a lot for the moment. And yeah, at some point I will ask your participation during the talk so that we can all be interactive during this moment. But just as a way to start, I would just like to give the perspective, and especially from the point that Isabel had mentioned about the Institute focusing on minerals and metallurgy, and probably not necessarily a focus on the aspect of leadership. But I must also indicate that even as you focus on your work as engineers, as scientists, there is always that component of leadership that permeates throughout all our lives. So what I'm saying is, irrespective of our titles, irrespective of our grades, at some point we lead others, we are leaders of leaders, and we might be individual contributors. So as long as we influence, we guide, we give direction to somebody, even to ourselves, we remain leaders. So if we can all, for the contextual aspect of what we are doing, align with the definition that says we are all leaders, then there will be benefits that we get out of this talk this morning. So the four aspects that really are great measures as to whether leaders are making a difference are, firstly, making sure that you give a vision to your team so that they can have a clear line of sight where the organization is going. It might be a team, it might be the entire department, but there is always the importance of giving the vision to the team so that they can see where the organization is going. And that goes with goal alignment, where you cascade what is important to the team. But the second part is looking at talent. How do you identify and nurture talent? You know, there's a leadership guru in Ramcharan, and he says that identifying good talent is something that leaders should not outsource to everyone. It is a responsibility that they themselves need to carry so that they can be able to build effective teams and be able to deliver on the vision that they would have committed to. And it takes a no-brainer that we, in all organizations, profit or non-profit, the leaders are there to steer the team forward to ensure that they deliver on the results. So that's why it's important that the employees have got the tools, and then they've got whatever is necessary, the support system for them to be able to deliver what is expected out of them. And one of the critical aspects of leadership that I would also, that is the center of what we are discussing today, is the expectation that leaders should be able to navigate through change. So this is all about taking yourself, but as well as your team, along this bumpy ride. And I would believe that we all can agree that the period that we are in at the moment is quite a bumpy ride. So navigating change is one of the critical things that leaders are expected, and it is a measure of great leadership. But the question is, how many of us are prepared for such moments? And I believe that is a question that we'll continue to try to answer throughout this presentation, and we will be focusing on it beyond the pandemic as well. So I'm putting forward that leaders need to manage change. But let's be honest, the period that we find ourselves in at this moment, it's no ordinary change. It's no ordinary change by any measure of imagination or any stretch of imagination. You know, it's change at a different level. It's change of greater proportions. This is complex. Things are rapidly changing as we go. You know, when you move from one channel to the next, you go to check other countries, what is happening, you start to realize that this is uncertain. You know, there are so much high pressures. The stakes are high. You know, when you last checked yesterday, you find that the deaths have moved up. You know, governments are rallying each other to be able to support and share ideas on how to manage this. So it is no ordinary change. It's high pressured and stakes are high. And you know, as we go through this, let's also think of those families that have lost their loved ones in this process. Whether we know them or not, we are all connected by one thing, which is us being the human race. So this is a disruption of higher proportions. And my take is that it's a serious matter. However, I honestly believe that this too shall pass. Just like Ebola, anthrax, SARS, and any other pandemic, you can even look at economic meltdown of the 2008. This too shall pass. And I'm not saying this from a point of indifference or making it light, but I'm saying it from a point of conviction that says that if you and I can do the little just take small steps and abide by the prescripts that are being given by our authorities, by the World Health Organizations, and all credible institutions, we will be able to contribute our part towards the end of this disruption. And that is just a call. And that is where each one of us stand up and show our leadership, and irrespective of the title or the grade that we have, because it's a disruption of that is not ordinary. But I would also like to draw your attention to say, but what does this crisis present to us? And there's a Greek word that is called kairos, and it simply means the propitious moment for decisions. It's a moment where there's right, critical, and opportune moment for us to be able to make decisions. And unfortunately, those moments, we do not have a choice whether they are good or they are bad. It's a moment that says, here's an opportunity. What is it that we are going to do at this moment with this opportunity? And go through the process, leveraging the opportunities that the pandemic, for example, now presents to us. But it's not only about looking at going through, it's also about managing the here and now. What is it that we are going to do with the here and now so that we can be able to go through these challenges that are presented by the pandemic? Now, as leaders, we've got a few choices in this process. And yes, they are choices, because at the end of the day, we need to make choices so that we can be able to either move or remain stuck where we are. Now, if you look at our approach or our response to change, we have a choice to resist and avoid the realities of the moment. And if we do that, we will be stuck in pain and suffering. Just think about it. If governments or authorities were more involved into, but where did this thing start? How did it start? We have seen a little of that. But what I'm saying is, it is not our place. Ours is to accept the reality. Because once you start accepting the reality, you start opening up your mind and you start to see new possibilities, and something new starts to emerge as part of that process. For example, the Huffington Post tells us that companies like General Electric, your IBMs, your Burger King, they came during the economic meltdown, because IBM saw the opportunity. For example, Burger King realized that, people still need to continue to eat. How are we going to use this opportunity and then advance a greater cause? And when I say something new, I'm talking about something greater, a greater cause that benefits mankind. I'm not taking it lightly that there are people who might want to take advantage of this scenario, situation, but here we're talking about greater leadership, great leadership where people start to think about others. So once you open yourself, you start to see new things emerging. And let's also take it at a micro level. Currently you have individuals in their own homes, in their own places, that are saying, but there are opportunities that are coming with this coronavirus. The people who are saying, let me start a tutoring service. We don't know what is going to happen with the schools. Yes, we have seen the scenarios being played out by the minister, but they are saying, let's step up and then educate the learners who are struggling in mathematics, in science, in accounting, and all those things. And there are some people who have already started opening online platforms, and they are assisting the students for free. So as a result of this opportunity, they decide to say, hey, we are not going to resist and pretend that things are not happening, but we are going to take the opportunity and continue contributing to the greater good. So I'm not by any stretch of imagination saying to you, all things should be free. There are people like Burger King who said, hey, let's go out, and they still delivered what is good whilst getting money. So it's a choice that people make. But what I'm saying is, once we accept the reality, the space opens up and new things start to emerge. So as leaders, I think what is critical for us is to embrace this period as a dynamic force of adaptation and innovation. And once we start seeing this dynamic as this situation as that, we start to see things opening for ourselves. But maybe as we proceed during this talk, can I just maybe invite your contribution to this discussion? You know, I would like to pose a question to you, and I'm not sure whether you will be able to type as we go through this process. The question that I had for you is when you look at where you are in terms of your organization, what are those things, people-related issues, that you think have always been there, but they were taken for granted, or they were not leveraged enough? So what are those things that the pandemic exposed as far as people matters are concerned in your organization that you think they have always been there, but they have been taken for granted, or they have been there, but they were not leveraged to a larger extent? I'm not sure, Isabel, if people are able to type as we go through this process. But maybe
Yes.
I'll just
Tex,
wait
maybe
a
I can maybe explain. We can do either via Q&A or they can post their comments on the chat.
Okay, no, great. So in
Okay,
that regard, let me still continue. But just think about it. What are those things that have always been there, but we took for granted? Because a crisis has got this ability, if you like, of exposing things, either, like I said, presenting them as opportunities or as challenges. But let me just draw you to a few of them that from my stand, I looked at and I said, but why didn't we explore these things? Why did we have to wait for the pandemic to happen? But it happened and we are here at this moment. Let's look at a few that I have listed there, and maybe there are more. One of the things that I looked at was the tools of trade. Ladies and gentlemen, let's agree, Zoom has always been there. Skype has always been there. Microsoft Teams has always been there. Google Hangouts has always been there. And what I had seen from my interactions with different people is that some organizations, for example, started now running around to say, hey, let's put all these tools together. Who can we give access to these tools? And when we talk of tools of trade, for example, cell phones, you might find that some of your employees did not have phones, but now because we are going into the lockdown, now we start to think to say, wow, these people that we thought do not deserve to have cell phones, now they deserve to have cell phones. The people that did not have laptops but were only using the desktops were now ultimately the people who is saying they deserve to have laptops. So maybe somebody would want to argue and say there was a financial consideration to it. But what I'm saying is that, did we take it for granted, or did we leverage the tools that people had to use as a result? So the tools of trade for me are things that have always been there, but we took for granted. The other thing, for example, is the policies that promote engagement. Organizations have always said, especially the human capital divisions of organizations have always said, how do we engage our people? How do we ensure differentiation in how we bring engagement to the different people? Which cops do we allow to work from home? How do we apply physical work? How do we apply remote work? But for some organizations, this was not a natural thing to start applying this. But we finally get to a situation where the pandemic says, thou shalt do it. And as we always say, a change that is forced, it's not a good change. It's not a nice change because it limits your options. You just have to follow and go through with what the situation dictates at that particular moment. One of those things that I believe have always been said and taken for granted is that our people are our most important asset. Now, for me, the pandemic starts to say to us, whether we like it or not, organizations are not buildings. Organizations are people. And then we start realizing that when people are not there to be able to do the work, the organization starts to suffer. We know challenges around supply chains. We know challenges around meetings continuing. effectively as they would, because people are not there. Yes, to a certain extent, to a large extent, people are using technology, as we have indicated, like we are doing now, to be able to do a work. But it shows that when people are not there, work cannot just continue as normal. So it needs to say to us that people are our most important assets, and how we treat our people is very, very important. Another point that becomes a thorny aspect when it comes to leadership, and it is a necessary tool for leaders, is emotional and cultural intelligence. And there's a lot of literature that says your leaders require to be emotionally and culturally intelligent so that they can take the organization to the next level. So what is this emotional intelligence? It is nothing else but being perceptively in tune with yourself, with your emotions. You being able to be situationally aware so that you can lead your team effectively. So it's about your self-awareness, your self-management, and your ability to manage the relationships. So this emotional intelligence is nothing to do with you having a box of tissues in your office, and then when your employee cries, you cry as well. It has got nothing about you being a psychologist to an employee, but it is just a competence that leaders require to be able to take their teams through these difficult times. And you cannot do it better except to have the intelligence and the cultural quotient, which is being able to respond to the diverse situations, social groupings, and how you communicate to people. So this is one of the key aspects that for me, during this pandemic, it was exposed to say, hey, emotional intelligence has been spoken about, cultural intelligence has been spoken about, but the situation starts to accentuate its importance in terms of how you engage your employees, how you become empathetic, how you show compassion, how you show connection to your employees. I liked seeing the article that is written by your president of the 17th of February, my mother's date of birth. May her soul rest in peace. And he was saying, Mr. Mchanjana, there that he wishes hope, he sees hope, and he wishes happiness in the SAIMM members' relationship. That is a leader taking that posture and saying emotions are important because human beings are the ones that make this institute to flourish. So the other opportunity that I saw was creating shared value. It has always been there, whether you run it from a CSI perspective or not. But for me, this opportunity says, organizations, how have we been doing our social impact? How do we create value to communities? You have seen now Vodacom donating 20,000 phones to the health sector. You see companies coming up now, even if the sanitizers are not part of their mainstream production, they are now getting into that space to be able to contribute to this bigger need that is there, the face mask and all those things. But I think it's something that says, go back and say, how do I contribute to the community in a greater way? Even if this was not my main focus, but beyond the pandemic, is it something that as an organization we'd like to continue towards so that we bring solutions to the social problems or social ills that the country is faced with? So those are the things that came to mind as I looked at what the pandemic has done and what is it that we as leaders can do going forward to either revisit or then tighten some of the loose screws as far as those areas are concerned. And we'll talk about that at a later stage as well. Now, with understanding that picture, our response matters. Our response really, really matters. There's a gentleman by the name of C.S. Lewis. He's no more, but he said, you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. And this is my appeal, my call to all the leaders to say, what we can only do at this moment is right where we are, we can do what is necessary to be able to change the ending. So our choice is either to adapt, to suffer, or to lead through this change process. And the key part about where we are at this moment is that if your organization has got bad leadership, in most cases, you'll find that in a crisis, the organization go down faster. But if the leadership has been good, your organization will either maintain where they are or they will rise with the occasion. So our response matters in a sense that we have to choose whether we adapt, we suffer, or we lead. And irrespective of how we see the situation, today's normal will not be tomorrow's normal. Things will change. We see it already in the education space, and I don't think this is just a call to cause panic, but the reality is that at a personal level, at an organizational level, things will start to change. Without taking much time, in the last 2 weeks, I was focusing on how people use this time, and I asked people to reflect on key things, aspects of their lives, be they relationships, finances, their careers, their health, as well as the higher purpose that they serve in their lives. And some people said, looking at where I am with my finances now, I think I'll approach it differently because tomorrow will not be the same. The same with relationship as an example. So I believe that things will never be normal again. But at the end of the day, it is about the application and how we're going to apply ourselves to the new environment. Now, what is it that leaders do we need to do to be able to respond to this change? We adapt, we suffer, or we lead. And the first thing that leaders, I would say, it's a no-go area. It's adopting a tunnel vision. Because leaders who have got a tunnel vision are bound to suffer. It's not about adaptation, it's not about leading, but it's just suffering. Because your tunnel vision is motivated by fear. And anything whose motivation is fear and desperation is bound to fail. Just think about it. Any hate that is full of fears has no space for alternatives, has got no space for possibilities. So a leader who, when we adopt fear in this situation, we don't see other alternatives, like I said. But it is important that we shed the fear away, acknowledge it, shed it away, so that we can participate in our own rescue. Because that's what you need to do. You need to participate in your own rescue. You cannot sit back and think that somebody must come and rescue us. As leaders, we need to contribute ideas and see broader perspective, even within the challenges that we are currently facing. So, because as leaders, if we see this period as only the lockdown, that's a tunnel vision. Because remember, these things are interconnected. It is not only the 21 days that has now been extended to the end of the month. It is about wider issues. It's about families, it's about finances, it's about employability of people. It's about how then do we give lasting solutions to societal problems. So that is how leaders should start to think broadly about this pandemic, not just as a lockdown, 21 days, 30 days will be over, and then we are going back to work. That will be more of a tunnel vision, and we will not be able to explore a lot of possibilities as we go through this process. And as a leader, I appeal to you to look at it that way. Challenge your team if they've got a tunnel vision as well. Help them, guide them, coach them to see the broader perspective of what this pandemic can bring. And not only this pandemic, even beyond other challenges that we will experience as we go through. So the first thing is challenge your tunnel vision mentality if it is there. The second point is we have to deal with realities at the same time. And unfortunately, as a leader, employees will come to you and ask questions. And as they ask these questions, yes, you need to give hope to your employees and strength. And hope is not just optimism. It is something that says there's a goal, there's a pathway, and then there's agency to what which we are doing. But at the same time, you need to give people reality. And let me just draw you to Jim Collins. Probably some of you have read the book, Good to Great. And in the book, Good to Great, Jim Collins came across Mr. James Stockdale. And after the interview with James, he came up with what he called the Stockdale paradox. And in the James Stockdale was a prisoner of war after Vietnam. And between 1965 and 1973, he was tortured at least 20 times. And as he was going through the torture, he realized that other people's coping mechanism and response requires assistance. And then he made it his business to assist other prisoners to go through physical and emotional torment through that ordeal. And when Jim Collins interviewed him, he said to him, he asked a question, as you were working with these people, who did not survive? And James Stockdale's response was very, very powerful. He said, the people who did not survive are the optimists. And he said, these are people who would say, I will be out of prison in Christmas. And then Christmas comes and nothing happens. And then they would say, I'll be out in Easter. Easter comes and it goes, and then they will pick up another period until they died. And he said, the only reason that they died, it is because of a broken heart. And as you read there on the slide, he says to Jim Collins, you must never confuse faith that will prevail in the end with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality. So now, what am I saying with the paradox? I'm saying employees, there are news going out there. Employees will come to you and ask and say, are we going to experience salary cuts? Is there going to be retrenchments? Is the lockdown going to be extended? You know, now, as a leader, you have to stand and rise to the occasion and give people hope. But at the same time, you cannot give people false hope. So that is where, as a leader, we say you balance hope with real facts on the table. You know, for example, if my team were to ask me as to whether will there be retrenchment, the reality is I don't know at this moment. Maybe the facts, the figures, the company financial figures do not say that at this moment. When we get to that point, we will talk to that point. So the challenge with leaders is that sometimes they might get into the trap of wanting to give optimism, hope, just a long rope to people to say, now things will always be better, balance that with facts so that your employees can know exactly what is it that you are dealing with. Okay, and as we go forward, the other thing that I would say leaders should do as part of leading through this change process is relinquish control. You cannot do everything on your own. As leaders, if we try to do and know everything, we are just putting a burden on ourselves. You know, gone are the days when I don't know used to be a swear word. Earlier we spoke about emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence. This is where it comes to saying I don't know, linking to the last slide. It's a good thing for leaders to say, I don't know, I'll get facts for you. Or go to this and this websites for you to be able to get facts for yourself. So relinquish control. You cannot be a conductor of everything, especially during a crisis. You have a team for a reason. And it is for that reason that you need to delegate to the right appropriate people, but also retain the decisions that you only can make. They might be budgetary decisions and other stuff, but you cannot put everything around you and trying to run with everything under these lockdown conditions. Relinquish control and make sure that your team is involved in the whole process. As an example, last week we actually, the team that I'm working with now at Mintech, outside the Dreams Made Possible, we just came up with, signed with a new recruiting platform, and there was training that was done last week. So the only thing that I had to do was to accept an invite to the meeting, to be there, present, listen, and ask questions that I need to. But one of my team members had run with everything. and that it involves that part of the work. So as leaders, we need to be comfortable not to be seen or not to be around, and let people run with that which they are appointed to do, whilst giving support and guidance in that process. So leaders must be able to relinquish control. But some of the things that as leaders we need to do as we step up this leadership through this change is creating unity of purpose. I can bet you now that some leaders have gone off during the first announcement of the lockdown without telling their people or engaging their people of what needs to be done during the lockdown period. Now with the extension going to the end of April, was supposed to end now on Thursday. Now it has been extended. You will not be surprised that some leaders are still not going to go back to their teams. So wherever the teams are in limbo. But we also might not be surprised when people go back to work, there are some expectations that, wow, I was expecting that you should have done 1, 2, and 3 during that process, you know. So leaders need to be able to highlight what is important, what is that singularity of purpose that the team should be focusing on at this moment. Yes, it's not a business as usual. So we cannot expect that everyone is going to run and do everything as they would under normal circumstances. But what is that single aspect that brings the team together, that purpose that the team needs to achieve at the end of this lockdown? And I'll give you an example just before we go off this slide, you know. And the most important way of going forward on this is leveraging the competencies and capabilities of your team. But most importantly, being clear on what needs to be delivered. And I would like to share with you the model that Brené Brown uses with her team. Brené Brown, for those that don't know her, is a guru in the work of vulnerability, emotions, and the like. So she says, between her and the team, they realized that, you know, they were missing each other. And you and I probably have come across that, where, for example, you give somebody an instruction and you say, please draw me a report. And when you say to somebody, draw me the report, chances are that they will give you that spreadsheet, dump information, and throw it to you. And then when you receive it and you say, where are the graphs? And then they get surprised, but you said I must draw a report, you know. And I guess most of us have gone through that phase. But she says, use what we call task, which is TASC methodology, in terms of now bringing clarity to what needs to be done, especially now when I think about it in the circumstances where the interaction is not as frequent as it used to be. And the task simply means the T is who owns this task that needs to happen. No, and A is, does the person has the authority to be held accountable for that particular task? And that now goes to the next part, which is the support. Has the person been set up for success in terms of resources, in terms of clarity, in terms of time, for example? And lastly, do we have the checklist that we can go through that will tell us if the task is completed? And that is a methodology that I will recommend to you when you work with your teams in this particular moment, just to go through the task. Let me repeat quickly. T is about who owns the task. A is, does that person has got the authority to be held accountable for that task? Supported by that is the support, the S. Does the person, has the person been set up for success in terms of success, time, resources, and clarity? You know, if we go back to the earlier slides where we spoke about technology, I have been working with my team, for example, they would say, hey, my data has run out. Then support the people to be able to have data so that they can continue to be able to do the work. And lastly, the checklist. Do they have the checklist to know which steps to follow so that they can be able to complete the task? So that unity of effort is very, very important in this stage. So what I have done personally with my team at this moment was to say, what are the key projects that we need to deliver at this moment? I sat with my second line in command and say, looking at these projects, looking at the competencies and capabilities of the team, who can we give these projects too, because remember, projects that we came up are not necessarily the daily activities, the daily task of these employees. But we had to say also use this opportunity as a way to train and capacitate these members, and then we divided the work between the team. But the most important thing was to come with what we call the definition of victory. For this particular moment, when we say the job is done, what does it mean? And then we had to define that. And then we was on a call with the team just to get questions and to clarify that again. And then from there we said, then what is the checklist? And I said, you know what, we're not going to check with you every day, but probably in the next week we meet again, and then that's how we're going to take the job further, so that we build on this unity effort going forward. The second last, I believe, slide, or the third, is about being inclusive. For you to lead effectively through this change, it's about being inclusive. Some of you, not some of you, probably all of us, those who have got teams, as an example, you have teams, and as you go into the lockdown period, you realize that not all of your team members will be kept engaged all the time. But it does not mean that because you've got a meeting with others, you totally exclude them. By just even touching base with them one-on-one, just finding out how the lockdown is treating them, their families, is an important part of the leader, from an emotional part of leadership. But then you know that the greater time you spend with these employees, but making sure that everyone is included. And part of including the rest of the entire team is one tip that I've is the leader brought all of his people to a 30-minute check-in once a week, and that was done. So this is not an opportunity to start micromanaging people, wanting to make sure that every moment of their daily lives, they are involved in what your company needs them to do. That is not going to work at this moment. It is about giving them space and then giving them projects that will stretch them, and that will give you and them a reasonable time to be apart, and then you will come probably once a week just to check on how they are doing. So that's part of leading effectively. Now, if we also don't look ahead, if we don't think long term, then change will be forced upon ourselves. But this is an opportunity for us to be able to be deliberate about the change and start thinking long term, evaluate the structures of your work and how work needs to be done going forward. I think this was a clear way, a wake-up call to say maybe certain things, certain processes are not necessarily the way they should be. So maybe you need to look at processes, maybe look at policies and say, how do we adapt these policies? They might be policies in your line of work, they might be policies in the human resource space. Because remember, as a leader, much as you are not a human resource specialist, you are a people manager, and those policies are meant to assist you to be able to lead effectively. So there might be opportunities that you see during this time that you say, maybe you yourself don't have to do them, but they might be recommendations to your human resource department to say, let's start to look at these things differently. These are the learnings that we have learned during this period. And most importantly, let's bolster the change capability in our leaders. We can take the lead ourselves to change our leadership capability. Or again, we can go back to our partners in human resources and say, this change hit me, caught me wanting, and I don't want the same to happen with the next change, because it's guaranteed. It might not come as a result of the pandemic. It might come because of economic factors. You don't know. Some of us sitting here, we don't know as you go into your companies, whether, for example, you'll have to restructure and lay off people. That is where change capability will be needed. So that is one capability that I will say as a leader, do something yourself, self-development, or go into your HR department and talk to them about building this capability within yourself, but as well as your team. And basically what you do there is looking at developing your change capability, going back to your value system as an organization and align them to how you want to make decisions in that organization. And lastly, how do you build resilience as a team going forward so that you can impact people differently? So that's about thinking long term. And as I close, what is important as we go through this change is we should not leave ourselves behind. One thing about leaders is that we can look for everyone That is, those leaders who believe in people development, in people, they will look at their teams and then they forget themselves in the process. And let me just tell you a short story, and then you might ask yourself, why does this have to do with the change? In 2018, actually 2017, I went on full scale on my business, and things were, as you know, the business, how it starts with its waves, ups and downs. And beginning of 2018, my mom took ill, and on the 5th of March, the 3rd of March, we laid her to rest. A week later, the due word came to say, yes, we have been trying to shape this, but for me it's not working. I want a divorce. Now I'm dealing with the loss of my mother. A week later, I'm dealing with the divorce. And this was the reality. Fast forward to the end of that month, I was seated alone in the house. And no wife, no kids, nobody, just alone in the house. So for me, that was a crisis at that particular moment. Now, I'm not necessarily, for example, going out there and being vulnerable about my story as a sympathy-seeking tool. No, I'm saying I used that period and followed some of these examples that I've listed on the slides. And those same processes are the ones that I'm also using in this crisis. So what I'm saying to you is you always have got your go-to skills that helps you to go through the challenges, whether when you're running out of money as a family, whether there's death in the family and all those things. We bring all of those now and leverage them as we go through the crisis, because you've got a responsibility to yourself to take care of yourself as a leader. Hence I'm saying, be good to yourself. Be responsible for your own morale. I could have chosen, for example, to sit in pity. You can choose now to sit in pity and say, hey, people are passing, people are dying around the world. Am I the next victim? That is a tunnel mentality. Be responsible for your own morale. Pick yourself up. And in that process, stay calm. Because as you stay calm through this process, that helps you to get more done. That helps you to get more done. How I keep myself calm, for example, yes, I want to know what is happening, but I have keep up some slots during which I go into to watch TV. What is the update? Just go to the app. Sometimes I just go to the app, know what is happening, and that's it. And then I set up some time to say, within this hour, I'm going to use it as a power hour. Go and do this that I need to do for my work, and then I get out, so that I separate myself from this noise that is happening. Just imagine the first day of the lockout, a lot of WhatsApp messages you were getting. You know, you could not keep calm in those environments. But in the process, stay connected. Who's on your speed dial? Who do you bounce ideas with will continue to be important in this process. Keep fit, keep healthy. Whether it's a 20-minute in your living room or everywhere, but we need to keep mentally astute. We need to keep physically astute, emotionally astute through all this process. And most importantly, engage in something meaningful. Engage in something meaningful as we go through this, because you are the one who leads other people now. If you are not taken care of, if you don't take care of yourself, how then can you take care of the others? That's why we probably, all of us have traveled, and you know that when the air hostess tells you that, you know what, should we go down into the sea, you must put a mask first on you, not on your child, not on your spouse, but on you first, so that you can save yourself to be able to save others. And this is what this slide is saying. Save yourself first. Get something purposeful and meaningful that you engage in. For example, I also use this time to write my second book, Write in the morning. I get that time and push write early hours in the morning, and then when I go back to sleep, when I wake up, I feel that I've done something purposeful that will go back to my brand statement, which is really to use my life experiences to cultivate personal mastery and self-worthy leaders across the world. And with those words, I hope this will assist to take you and your team forward in managing this pandemic. Thank you, Isabel. I don't know if there are questions.
Tex, thank you so much. That was, first of all, full of personal mastery for myself. I took a few notes. One of the things that really struck me is that we cannot change the beginning, but we
Yep.
can change the now. I think that will stay with me for the rest of the lockdown, because even when you are staying calm, sometimes you feel a little bit panicky. And I
Yes,
think
yes,
most of
yes.
us have our bad days, but that really helped me. And I think the second thing I want to say is thank you very much also for the masterclass and presentation. It was really well.
Okay.
I think it was really, I really enjoyed it. Um, the other thing that I wanted to talk about is perhaps I see the comments from from the attendees is also that it's a very wonderful presentation. I really did enjoy it myself. The crisis is not just the lockdown, and
Yes.
that is also very powerful. I think being near this lockdown, and we all, like you said, took a lot of the stuff that we already had for granted. And I think when I engaged with you originally and asked you if you would be willing, one of the things I said to you is like we all have to adapt so fast, and I really appreciate today's time that you spent with us. My final thought, I think there's just a lot of appreciation from the team, but I really think we should redo this again in about 2 weeks' time, have another one of these sessions. It really lifted me up for the week. Um, if your head is full of fear, what did you say? There's no space for original ideas.
No, there's no space for original ideas, and in that way, you cannot play part in your own rescue.
That's fantastic. Sure. I look forward to your next book. I'm sure we should definitely feature that when you have to launch that. And as I said to people, we can follow you on LinkedIn so you can keep us up to date of when the book is ready.
Oh,
I hope.
yes, definitely.
Thank you. So if I see there's no direct questions, just very positive comments. So I think that makes us for today, unless any of the attendees would like to ask a question. Nothing from the moment, just very positive. And I think some of the questions are, please, can we do this again? So,
Oh, yeah.
okay, so we'll contact you and ask you to do this again for us maybe in a week or so, 10 days or so from now, if you're okay.
Not a problem. I really, really appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate the comments. Wesley, Queen, Aditya, Carl, Unity, much, much appreciated, really. And thanks for the opportunity. And I'm saying, let's spread the word, because sometimes we are the 27 people on the call, but there is someone elsewhere that can benefit from the nuggets, so to say. I'm not saying necessarily take the whole presentation, but I'm saying the nuggets, because that's how we grow, all of us collectively.